about the Aligarh district where I conducted the my study. I've collected data from Aligarh district of Uttar Pradesh, Bhadoni district, and Gorakhpur district. 3 districts I have covered, and I have chosen the villages from there. So when I was in Aligarh, I was just trying to convince an ASHA and INAM worker. So they were not ready to give me an interview, and they were like, "We are not ready to get the picture clicked. We are not ready. We can talk to you in an informal way, but we are not ready to get recorded." So, but for research, obviously, you need something on record. Otherwise, how you are going to analyze that data? How you are going to get the transcription part? So, and with connecting to this transcription in focus group discussion, what I felt that there are a huge amount of dialogues which is of no use, because when you are throwing a question in a group and those people, they are less educated or illiterate, they started talking something else. So controlling or managing that focus group discussion is a very difficult task. Thank you.
Sticking to the time, and we'll talk more about it. And now I request Anand.
Good morning. I am Anantu. I am a third-year PhD candidate here at Manipal Institute of Communication. My research interests lie in the realm of online dating. So online dating users are at the center of my PhD, and I study motivation, experiences, possible effects. I also have a major sociological component in my study, which is the whole aspect of relationship attitudes. So I mean, that brings me to my first challenge. I mean, I feel the challenges or the factors that really affect your PhD experience. Well, there's mainly you, right? What your personal situation is. Then there is your supervisor. I think the supervisor largely is the one factor that determines your PhD experience. And then the institution, and then comes the topic, I feel, right? So again, my first challenge, the first challenge that I faced in the early days of my PhD was to really find out if my topic really fits into the whole realm of communication and media studies, right? I remember some of the early conversations that I had with Professor Sanjay during our classes. Ashwini would probably remember it. We discussed on what the boundaries of our discipline is, right? So I guess the conclusion was that communication as a discipline does not exist in a vacuum, right? It's an amalgamation of all the other social science traditions, and so because my topic had this large social theory chunk, I had some difficulty in situating it within the research that we do in this department, I guess. So again, there was this confusion of what where does this become a sociology PhD, or when does this become a communication and media studies PhD? So that was my first challenge. So currently I'm in my data collection process, right? And one thing that I'm seeing with especially the interviews that I'm doing is that intimacy, relationships, etc. These are very private matters, right? And especially when I'm interviewing women, I tend to experience some sort of hesitancy from their part to share these private matters. Again, dating, intimacy, etc. These are all the junction of private and public life. But I still am struggling to figure out a way to effectively get through to them, right? How do I make them trust me? How can they share quality thoughts and feelings about this topic. That's something that I'm grappling with at the moment, right? And possibly one of the solutions for that is for me to probably do these interviews in person. I mean, that may um, make them trust me more, probably. Um, Ashwini spoke about funding, right? Something else that I was thinking about today morning was um, how visible are these funding opportunities to PhD students? We have so many funding opportunities in India. We have ICSSR, you have other organizations, you have international opportunities for funding, but unless you go out of your way and search for them, it's very hard for you to find these opportunities. So I think probably from an institutional perspective, what universities can do is, I don't know, create some sort of a consolidated list of these opportunities and maybe share it with doctoral students around the time they register. So yeah, that's basically my share of experiences.
That's like 20 seconds before time. Job well done, Anantu. And now I request Ashwini to talk about the issues and problems she faced during her PhD journey.
Yes. Hello, I'm Ashwini Iyer. I'm a third year research scholar in MIC. I'm doing my PhD on exploring astrological beliefs online, offline in two districts, the Dakshin Kannada and Udupi, under the guidance of Dr. Shubha HS, Professor Shubha HS. So I was journalist previously. It was a very huge challenge for me to convert myself from journalistic life to this academia. So writing style, basically I was working in a Kannada press, and coming back here and unlearning things was little difficult for me. And right now I'm in the phase of my data collection. Before this, under Mahe, we need to get ethical clearance. So questionnaire was done. Basically, my study has three phases of data collection. One is survey and focus group discussion and in-depth interview. So yes, we need to get clearance from ethical committee, which is basically done for medical or medical researchers or researchers related to health and so on and so forth. So we had to wait for 6 months to get the clearance for our questionnaires and all the and then after that we had to do some changes or give some clarifications for few questions. Again, it took a couple of months. So totally we had to wait for at least 8 months to get clearance. 8 months is a huge period of time. And yeah, correct. After we got the clearance, I started to collect data, went on field work. First phase was survey. So astrology content through social media. And we had constructed questions in such a way, and I had to give away to my respondents. I could see them tilted towards this online astrology content by certain things, maybe like wearing a tortoise ring. That was very frequent in throughout my data collection. And they were not ready to agree on the point that they see these contents. And I could even see in the smartphones are of really very much of help. So there is this glance thing. So it will show you certain things like day horoscope or news or breaking news, etc. Everything that our astrology content was moving on in that smartphone, but they were not ready to answer. So I had to convince them, just like Anantu said, I had to build this rapport, and I had to make them to trust me first and then to answer me or be a respondent for my study. So there, and also this survey thing, we have a few questions which people want to just skip that question. So that was another challenge, making them to answer all the questions. So if one or couple of questions go unanswered, then we need to just throw away the questionnaire, or we need to go back to them. But when your respondent number is very huge, it's really very difficult to go back to them and get it answered completely. So secondly, FGD, focus group discussion. So that was another challenge. Basically, here in Dakshin Kannada and Udupi district, we have this Tulu language predominantly used for all business things, etc. And people were very happy to answer in Tulu, only for few questions, not for the questions which is related to my topic. And they were like, when I had my first and second FGD, they were looking at the faces what the other one wants to tell, whether he is for the topic or against. I had told them clearly that it is not like positive reaction or negative thing. It's okay, whatever you see, whatever you do, you just explain it. And they were like really hesitant to be a part of answer few questions. And there were like a few leaders, or like few people who were looking at the other person and they wanted to answer later. So this non-verbal communication was another challenge for me to handle. Also, one more thing I wanted to talk was about the consent forms. So here consent forms are constructed in such a way that is like those are most suitable for patients or other groups, not for social sciences thing. So whenever I was giving them the consent letter form, or whenever I was giving this participant information sheet, they were literally scared to sign it. So I think we need to have a consent form and participant information sheet which would suit our studies, the social sciences, more. So yeah, these were the few challenges which I faced, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Ashwini. Actually, yeah, those things, along with other scholars that you discussed, will be the points of discussion and hoping for a fruitful impact. So now we have soon to be Dr. Initially Dalbert dissertation, Rita Sapkota, talking about her PhD and research experience.
Thank you, Dr. Bhargav. Thank you for Mahit giving this opportunity to me and to all of us. Talking about my PhD study and my thesis topic and my study, this is, I want to connect to my other studies on it, because I'm just passed my topic and did not started research on that, because I was I started my PhD journey after finishing my specialization on electronic media. Electronic media, where I did just television program, radio program, and other television programs. I did not did my research in any topic. Before that, I studied management. I worked as a journalist for 20 years, but I studied management. And I jumped to mass communication in the master's, where I specialized electronic media. And I did just television and radio program, where I had not that opportunity to do thesis and research work. And I jumped to research work, but it was so difficult for me. And it was class-based PhD, so some relief for me that time, because teachers were teaching in classes, so I could understand somehow what is research and what. For me, research is that world which attracts me from the very childhood stage. And for me, still research is attracting me towards it. So I wanted to do some research on political communication sector, as I worked as a political reporter in Kathmandu, like Aswini, right? You have that. And but I worked as a media coordinator at Embassy of State of Qatar. And my husband work in Qatar. And Nepal is a labor sending country. Most Arab countries are labor taking countries. And as labor sending country, Nepal has just sending laborers, not expert and not skilled worker like other countries. Like India also sending skilled worker. But Nepal is sending just laborers. And I saw there is a huge number Nepal is sending laborers only, those countries like Dubai, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Oman also. And the numbers staying in those countries directly affected to Nepali media. So there is lots of online media, lots of radios, lots of television. Okay, now I'm finishing. There is huge number of media, and our economy is tiny in compared to India, Pakistan, other countries. And advertising market linked to the economy. And as our economy is so tiny, then how those medias are surviving in this time? So I looked on it that all the migrated Nepalese are sharing those content, watching those content, and all media they are watching. They have groomed very fast. So it means, and I looked forward on it that the mobile apps which downloaded outer territory of your country getting more money. Like if one app is downloaded outside your country, that gets $10, and inside your country just $1. And they focus news about those migrated people. So my topic I chose, like how diasporic community using Nepali media. That is my topic. It is broad topic, and I was in a sky at this moment. I have to, and I want to land it on that thing. So I choose Qatar and Dubai for my study. So not much more than this. So I'm looking forward books and theory methodology for this study to support my study. So I'm here to look forward on that. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Rita. Now we have MIC PhD scholar Samriddhi Nandi, who will be talking about her.
Thank you, sir. You've introduced me, so I won't do it again. But I will talk a little bit about my topic. So I'm actually working on digital inclusion and exclusion of fisher women in the coastal area of Udupi. So that is the Udupi district. And so because this, sorry, so because this conference is talking broadly about authenticity, I've decided to make a few points related to my study. So I'll be talking about two things, sampling and data collection. So first of all, I'm not from here, so I'm essentially an outsider who's looking into the community. So it's quite difficult for me to gather the participants, which is why I've decided to go for the snowball sampling method. So the way this happens is that I approach somebody, and then according to the criteria of my participants, my first participant then leads me on to other participants, so on and so forth. So the problem here is that I'm working with fisher women, and it's more or less a community which know each other fairly well because they work together and they've obviously all come across one another at some point of time in their profession. So it's quite difficult for me to then place these people for, let's say, something like a focus group discussion, because essentially a focus group discussion is not supposed to have people who are familiar with each other or know each other, etc. So that is an issue that I've faced. So this also can affect the quality of my data. So then this later on becomes an issue. And as for data collection, so like Aman has just pointed out, so there's a lot of language barriers actually, because I'm not from here and I can't even speak Kannada, let alone Tulu. So of course I have to engage the help of some other people for me to be able to do my research. And there are also a lot of cultural aspects which I'm getting to learn because of this. And the translation is also something that I must keep in mind. And as we know, in India, which is such a big country, languages change every 40 kilometers. So even between Mangalore and Udupi, Tulu, there's a lot of difference. So there's no way that we can actually get past that except to gain some help from uh, other researchers or research assistants, etc. Secondly, again, adding to your point, Aman, the gatekeeping is definitely an issue. So like you mentioned with community health workers, gatekeeping here is also an issue because this is also a community which has its own subjective norms, etc. And so to collect that authentic data in a community which has such a strong presence of hierarchy, it's governed by norms and associations. These fisher women are part of associations, unions, etc. So to get through all that red tape and to get through the permissions, it takes quite an effort. And thirdly, the issue in data collection is that participants themselves are quite mobile and quite busy, because usually you get to catch them only at their workplace. Otherwise, it's difficult to gather them together. So conducting FGDs and IDIs are an issue. And the last point that I would like to talk about is compensation. So in the West, usually participants are compensated for their participation in your work. Or, there is some kind of expectation. If you're doing an action research, for example, you're working towards a goal, or if you're doing participatory research, again, you're working with the community in order to improve the quality of their lives. But here, it's a little difficult to do that because participants are often suspicious of what you're trying to do. And also in terms of offering compensation, there's really not a lot that you can do, right? So that is one thing which is not discussed a lot in terms of, difficulties of conducting research. So yeah, these are my bits. Thank you.
Thanks, Samriddhi, for sticking to the time and to the point. Now, I request Assistant Professor at MIC, Shruti Shetty, to share her research experience.
Thank you. Thank you, Bhargav. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak about my own journey in brief. So the broad area is my broad research area, sustainability communication. And I'm looking to explore how sustainability communication on social media affects or influences the pro-environmental behavior of millennials and Gen Z. So unlike a lot of my co-panelists over here, I am in a very different place, I could say, primarily because having been in academics for 12 years, it's a little weird to say I'm an early researcher. So the challenge also is that, being from the industry, so I've had 6 years industry experience prior to teaching in advertising and brand communication, just to get myself reoriented to understand how or why research is important. So I think that was a challenge for me as well as my seniors. So I would say that people who come from the industry, we are looking at the area in from a very, very practical, application based approach. And what we've been taught about research from school, it is very sort of, something that you do and it just gathers dust. So I would say that would be one of the core challenges that I would like to, I wanted to bring up because I'm an industry person currently doing research. So I would say that the biggest challenge for me was to reorient myself and to understand how a research is going to help me become a better academician, because teaching is my passion. So anything that is going to help me be a better teacher, I think I would do it. And I think that's how I sort of oriented myself and got into research. And again, compared to a lot of people who are quite forward in their journey in research, since this is my second year, I just stepped into the second year. Certain things are quite fresh in my memory. So I have not yet gotten into the data collection stage, but just the initial challenges, which is being from a communication background. I wanted to do something in marketing communication, and that's why I approached my guide, Dr. Smita. So when she asked me about how you're going to be quantifying things, how you're going to be measuring these variables, I remember I just sat there and was blinking at her, because I'm like, okay, so these things need to be measured now. So I would say that would be that was my second challenge, to understand quantitative research, to understand how variables are measured, to finalize scales. So this was something that was extremely challenging in for me to arrive. So for me to first convince myself, so I would say literature review helped a lot. So a lot of reading helped me arrive or understand this. And then I had to convince my guide, see, this is what, I'm wanting to do. So just the amalgamation of quantitative and qualitative, but understanding quantitative research was probably the second challenge. And third is to do with methodology. So I was very keen on experiment method, and very, very keen. So I did a lot of reading and wanted to pitch that. And I did pitch that to my guide. But what I realized is that in India, in social sciences, in marketing communication, experiment method is not widely used, because of which guidance for me would have been difficult. So the support that I would find with my fellow researchers, and whom do I go and ask, where do I look for, guidance? So that was very challenging. And finally, then we settled on survey as a method to collect quantitative data. Broke my heart a bit, but I think also as a part-time researcher, I think I need to be a little bit more realistic as to what I can achieve with my full-time job here. Hopefully a part-time mother, which I'm trying. So with all these challenges, I think I settled, I would say, to do survey. But yeah, my heart was set on experiment method. So I don't know where the issue is, but I think at the school level, at least when I was in school and college, the focus on research was so minimal that we had to do a lot of learning on the way. So I think this is something that I could put forth. So mostly I'm speaking from a perspective of an industry person in research and a person who's working for a lot of years and now getting into research. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Shruti, for sticking to the time, and this gives an opportunity to discuss about ourselves. And now we have last speaker, so Parnika Pawan Kumar Attawar. She'll be sharing her experience.
Hi everyone. I'm Saparnika. I'm studying my research topic rather is to do with children and media. So that's the really broad topic, and within that, I'm trying to understand young children between the ages of 1 to 10 years as media audiences and how they consume different kinds of media, particularly using digital platforms. And the place where they do this, essentially the home, is what is my area of inquiry. So at the center of my research are young children, their families, and also digital devices that the family owns and the children consume. Right. And so how did I arrive at this research question? So essentially it began with personal experience, I would say, just like Shruti, I too am a mother to two children. So, I've seen my eldest kid using different kinds of digital devices, and that's what triggered the interest in this topic. And more importantly, another reason why I decided to pick this was also, it was a very conscious decision. I knew that I'm in a full-time job. And it was a very, very conscious decision for me to choose my site of research, right? I knew that I needed access to my research respondents and my research participants. And so I decided where and how can I get this, right? With minimal effort. And that's why I thought that, okay, maybe studying families and children, the interest was already there, and I was just trying to see if it really fits into my the different research components, and keeping in mind the research site, where am I going to be conducting my research? So that was important to me as well, and that's how I zeroed in on this place, Manipal specifically. But since Manipal belongs to Udupi district, I'm keeping it for the sake of the sample, I'm keeping it within Udupi district itself. And within Udupi district also only the Udupi city municipality, because again, I can't go too much into it. It's a completely qualitative study, obviously, and therefore I will be interviewing parents and also wherever possible children. Because what I found through my literature review is also that there is a gap when it comes to gathering data from children, right? And that also becomes another challenge. So since I have parents and children as my respondents primarily, gathering data from them is very difficult, for the simple reason that parents naturally, when you start questioning them about their parenting practices or how their child uses digital devices, they suddenly start feeling guilty that maybe they're not really taking good care of their children. So I have to start my in-depth interviews with them with a disclaimer that this is not really to judge your parenting practices, but generally wanting to know how things are at home, right? And despite as much as effort I take, and we talked about rapport, the need to build rapport. And as I said, it was a very conscious decision. I am a mother. My son would have given me easy access to other parents, right? So that was my initial thought, and that did happen. So I did rely on my son's friends group to gather the initial data from. I had a rapport with most of them, but in certain cases, I still had to build one. But there's also this social desirability bias that creeps in, so parents would want to answer the way the society would expect them to answer, rather than being very, very honest with me. So that was one challenge. Second, as I said, COVID was a huge challenge for me, because when the lockdown happened, and even when there were restrictions on visiting families, right? Even parents were not willing to be ready for a face-to-face interview. And I had to make changes to my research plan, which meant that even I had already got my research clearance, ethics committee clearance. It did take me some time, but it did happen. I did receive the clearance, but then I had to make changes to that, the entire process again, because I was incorporating in-depth interviews. And then I was saying I'm doing interviews online because the families or the parents don't want it to be that way. So these were different challenges that came through. And also, in addition to that, getting children to talk, it's not so easy. As much as the parents, it's not always that you can talk to children so easily. Right? That was another challenge. And more importantly, simple things like seasonal effects. Weather would be a huge problem, because kids would fall sick. And if the kids fell sick, I wouldn't get the mothers or the fathers or the children. Right? So data collection became so difficult. It still is challenging. But in addition to that, I think the other challenges for me would be turning my data into publication. We do have our, deadlines in terms of you need to have at least minimum 2 Scopus Index publications. But for that to happen, it takes time. I'm only feeling more confident about my data just now, because this is when most of it is coming through for me. I'm able to, transcribe them and then, analyze them now. So I perhaps now can say that maybe I'll convert them quickly into publications, but perhaps I wouldn't have been able to say this a couple of months ago. Right. And in addition to that, another thing that I would want to place on record here is also that, as Shruti pointed out, she and I are part-time research scholars. So which means that we are still in a full-time job, and research becomes part-time. And but unfortunately, the academic part, the full-time academic load does not reduce. anywhere. It's the same, right? So which means that many a times balancing an academic calendar with research and a lot of other administrative duties, that becomes very, really tedious. So there are instances when you would have done some progress and then you would have completely lost touch with what you have read or documented, and by the time you come back to that, you lost 3-4 months already. So these, I think, would be my challenges specifically. Thank you, Bharat.
Thanks, Soparnika, for pointing out issues faced by full-time faculty members who are also part-timing as researchers. And before we leave the session open for discussion, I just quickly would like to give a brief on what each speaker shared in this panel session. So Dr. Ashwini was like she mentioned the journey, and she has a lot of things to share. I mean, especially for the budding research scholars in terms of how to go about challenges in academic writing and publication, and especially the importance of pilot study, which we tend to overlook sometimes. But it's very crucial. I appreciate that she pointed it out, and uh, statistics that both Shruti and Dr. Ashwini were talking about. I mean, there is a survey that many students would like to take up journalism or communication course to avoid maths. But when they come to research, like it's getting quantitative, and which is like we need to come to terms with, I understand. And Dr. Ashwini also pointed out a very important aspect of research journey, which is funding. And yeah, her PhD experience as compared to postdoctoral, which is funded by ICSSR, she feels slightly relaxed. I mean, this is something which funding brings in, something which many researchers lack, depending on institutional fellowships, so on and so forth. I appreciate that she pointed it out. And then we have Aman. It's actually talking about interesting issues that experiences, especially that he encountered. So there is always this armchair questionnaire that we have on our mind, and like we go to the field and see that like no, I mean sometimes even the review of literature doesn't help. And no matter what your supervisor's experience, no, I mean the field is always new. I mean it's interesting to hear from a male scholar who's aware of the situation, the patriarchal issues and focus group discussion, which is like something which is always time and again pointed out by senior academicians. Some of them are sitting over there, that you cannot teach gender as a separate thing. Like, it has to flow into each and every aspect and question that you mentioned it. I mean, that's really a very good point that you made. And recording this trust, building trust, not just with the, I mean, you are right. They're building trust with the participants, and not just with the participants. Sometimes you need to build trust with your supervisor also. Like, there are instances where, like, you get everything. I interviewed people, I remember, but I didn't have them on record. I said, like, my supervisor said, like, you didn't do any interview. What sort of researcher are you? Like, you have to go back to the field. When it's that's something, an exercise one needs to be very cautious of. And MIC research scholar Anantu, he spoke about how rightly research actually is not just you. I mean, it's your supervisor and the institution, your peer group. I mean, a lot of times there is this misconception that research is a loner job. It's a lone journey and all that. But these do have a direct impact on our research, not just impact, sometimes support, and sometimes I don't know about your experience, sometimes it can be annoying also. Um, and most important thing, communication is so broad a discipline. I think after philosophy, I mean, in a way, communication is a word or concept used cutting across disciplines, right from nanotechnology to latest every computational social sciences, everywhere it is visible, and setting or like trying to see boundaries of communication discipline is as difficult as like trying to figure out boundaries for the universe, which is like not possible. And he was also talking about he spoke about the funding issues and where are the resources. Many resource scholars are actually not so much aware of the funding opportunities. And Ashwini and another MIC research scholar was talking about the most important issue which was carried forward by other panel speakers as well is the transition from practitioner to researcher, transition from being a practitioner to a teacher. These are completely different roles. Sometimes we may not be very well equipped with, and we may not have the wherewithal sometimes to make this transition so smoothly. Uh, and she was also talking about the ethical clearance, which is a necessary, I won't say evil, but for the lack of the word, ethical clearance, ethics is very important. And but maybe there are certain institutional issues that do play and have an effect on your research. Yeah. And rapport and trust building during fieldwork mm, is something every researcher, I think, goes through. And that's a very important thing that you mentioned, the language barriers. And another most important point that she made is the consent form. Sometimes after agreeing for the interview, everything, sometimes some consent forms, when you look at them, it almost looks like a promissory note, and like we are asking for their family gold or property. Uh, I mean, they back off, and yeah, that's quite. Mm, I mean, that's something one needs to think about. Thanks for mentioning and highlighting that. And the term is again talking about after being a seasoned media practitioner, political reporter, transitioning the transitioning from that role to that of a researcher, was talking about that. I mean, the one of the major hurdle that she had to pass, and given the fact that like her education was in management, and then she had to make that switch again. I mean, it's doubly challenged in a way in her case. And yeah, one relief for her is that it's a lecture-based research, that the like most of the coursework was lecture-based, and that kind of helped her as she uh, expressed. And yeah, this market logics are market logics, political situation. They just not only play into the research and affect the research, but the process as well. And they shape how. I mean, she was talking about while talking about she was mentioning how a labor offering or labor giving country like Nepal has directly impacted the political and economic situation, as it had an impact on her research and helped shape or frame her research topic. Uh, and uh, and then we had Samriddhi, as to the point she was talking about the issues she faced with snowball sampling, which is used in qualitative study. And she actually shared interesting issues with respect to language. I mean, this is something, it changes every latitude. They say, yeah, which is like 40 kilometers or something. Like it's, yeah, I mean, this is something which I can relate to because I mean, just like Canada, I mean, Karnataka itself is multilingual, multicultural, and it's so diverse. Despite, yeah, like Soparnika pointed out, it's just Udupi. Now he is talking about Udupi municipality. There are like layers and layers as we dig into the, and sometimes it so happens that we choose a district and there is a redistricting that happens. Or border sharing disputes that happen. I mean, these are some things extra academic, and these are some things which are out of our control. And gatekeeping is an issue. One has to be, any researcher has to be very cautious of, and it's something that should flow into the methodology chapter. And I hope she's going to. I mean, I see that. Her methodology chapter being self-reflexive, and I'm looking forward to reading it than like summarizing it here. I mean, that sounds like a terrific work. And Sopanika, yeah, I mean, I'm very familiar with her work, and I uh, the access and convenience part. I mean, this is a double-edged sword that she's like walking on, and it's almost like it looks like the access is there because she's working within the proximity, but I don't think that's so easy. Researching on children, the consent itself is like difficult to get. B, uh, nowadays there are some university departments who say avoid doing research on children, but it's so important. And while I appreciate that the challenge she took up, I'm equally like I don't know. I always have a lot of solidarity that I try to extend. It's I sincerely appreciate her data work, and it's not just that. COVID and mind you, seasons, when we hear that someone is talking about whether it looks like they got bored or something, that's a general commonsensical notion people have. But no, out here, it's it rains and also children fall sick, and in waves it happens. And sometimes it so happens that she plants with her research work, I mean, data collection work in that specific time period, but respondents are not there. It's you. I hope one can understand the challenges that she's facing. And now I won't. I leave the discussion open. Yeah, yeah. From LS6, are there any questions? Actually, it takes. They say it takes a village to raise a child, but just to rephrase it, it takes a global village to raise a PhD scholar. And I mean, I'm a direct witness to such thing happening. And ICA is one platform where we have like people from different countries, and I hope there are some questions to the panel speakers. And yeah.
This good? All right. Okay. Just a second. Okay. Thank you very much for your wonderful insights. And I heard everyone has their own kind of struggles and strength, weakness, challenges. So this is really exciting. And we all have gone through this process, and we have shared our experience in the past, like you guys have been doing like this. So I appreciate and I congratulate all of you, and I want my best wishes to all of you to move forward without any more challenges so that you can complete your PhD as soon as possible. I have a few questions for any of you, not necessarily specifically to one. Question number one is about the research ethics process, because every university, they have their own research ethics board. I believe it is there in your university too. And when we have many new AI related chatbots and other AI related tools, and now we can use that in data collection process, data analysis process, and even writing process as well. So what is the idea in your university or a discussion you have, or whether you try to use some kind of AI tools in the process of writing your thesis or dissertation collection, whatever? So what is your experience on that? Whether you discuss that, you thought about that, you try to get some kind of permission in your research ethics board. So what is happening here? Because I'm completely unaware of how South Asia is dealing with AI tools. And so this is my questions. What kind of circumstance you have encountered? Question number one. Question number two, many of you are doing either qualitative or quantitative or mixed method approach. So because when we deal with qualitative research, then definitely that is criticized from the quantitative groups that it is not generalizable, even though it is focused. You cannot bring a single story and generalize as if the whole world is that. It is not like that. You have to go for the quantitative approach and collect more viewpoints from more people. And so there is always debate, because quantitative research is not perfect, so qualitative is there. But qualitative itself is not perfect, so we need to have a mixed method approach. So how do you perceive that? In your research, do you want to use quantitative and qualitative both so that it have a complementary type of finding? Or you simply go with one? Or what is the strategy in the university? Now, question number two, for anyone. Question number three is a bit easier. That is about the publication. So what is your university's policy, your department policy, whether they encourage you to publish before you submit your dissertation, or don't publish, otherwise it will be the problem of self-plagiarism, because again, you have to cite the same thing because it is already published. So what is the idea behind that? So these are three questions. Anybody of you are free to answer any of the questions. Thank you.
Hello, am I audible? Yeah. So I'll go first. So I'll just answer the second question because I am not using AI in any of my work. So when it comes to doing qualitative research, I think it's very difficult for people to accept it as something that is credible or something that has been actually well researched or something that has a meaning or a purpose. So I think we're all in kind of a rush to have, and at least one element like a survey or, a pilot study which involves a survey. So I think that's where we kind of get confused as to whether we should use triangulation or mixed methods. But for me, I decided to stick to qualitative because in my area, I realized that in terms of literature, in terms of census data, government data, district data, etc., health data, there's a lot of quantitative data. But when I went onto the field to actually understand, observe, speak to my participants, I realized that their lived experiences, their presentation and their representation in research was missing to a large extent. And I think that's what happens with a lot of government data. There's a lot of census, there's a lot of numbers, and there's like literally like, thousands of pages of numbers themselves, but it doesn't tell you anything, it doesn't show you anything about. It might tell you, okay, there is a certain chunk of population which is BPL, whereas there are some others who are doing well, but it doesn't really give you a holistic picture of the situation on the field. So that's why I decided to stick purely to qualitative data. And when it comes to ethics, I think there is also some kind of a relaxation here because I am able to conduct my research with by obtaining just informed consent from my participants. So I don't have to go through the entire, like the perils of the ethics board and the ethics committee of the university. Because, like somebody here rightly mentioned, it has a lot of elements to do with the medical sciences and the other kind of sciences, which may not be relevant to us and our discipline. So to me, it doesn't make sense for us to go through that lengthy procedure just for us to start our research. So yeah, that is my question to, I mean, that's my answer to question 2 as well as partly question 1. I'll pass it on to Aman.
I'll take the second question. My PhD and my research papers, both of them are focusing on the qualitative data only. So what I believe that with quantitative, you can get numbers. That's true. That's right. But specifically talking about my area, community health workers and their beneficiaries in rural areas, you cannot get the in depth in sharing my experience. I said that I have prepared a list of questions, but those questions have been changed on ground because the ground realities are always different. LR and somebody's experience cannot give you the ground realities in different location, different areas. The realities are always different. Challenges are always different. And uh, talking about the ethics part, what I feel that when you conduct uh, uh, surveys or when you conduct interviews and focus group discussion, it's very important to be ethical while the transcription part. Because what I feel, if you are adding some from your side in the transcription part, that is completely unethical. Be ethical towards the transcription because it will give you the pure data, the original data. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to answer the first question, that is on the AI part. So my postdoc research is a computational analysis. So what I'm doing is the sentiment analysis. So I'm retrieving data using data science, certain machine learning techniques I have learned, and I have retrieved data through those techniques. And then I'm pre-processing now. I'm in the stage of pre-processing the primary data. What I feel is like journalism has, yesterday, as we discussed in the panel session, has gone through a lot of technological changes. And newspapers, yes, we can maybe collect it manually, and we have a lot of databases for it. And television, any electronic media, we can record them. But what about social media? That's where the challenge comes. So for retrieving that huge voluminous data, we need artificial intelligence for that. We cannot do it manually. And if we try to do it manually also, it becomes personal bias. So we will need machine learning techniques, or in a broader sense, artificial intelligence. And that's where we can have an unbiased data, and even, analysis part is possible using algorithms only. After that, maybe this initial part of methodology becomes technical, but then, AI cannot replace our the journalism theories. It can never replace what agenda setting is. So the second part of methodology, it is purely journalistic. It is purely media studies, and it goes back to the traditional way of analysis. So, that's my take on AI.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about publication since it hasn't been addressed. So, I mean, Manipal, uh, we at Manipal, we have to publish two Scopus indexed journal articles, in spite of the recent relaxation, which I think is, to me, positive, net positive, and based on the kind of work that I'm doing, I think two articles in the span of 3.5 years for a full-time PhD, I think is reasonable. I mean, I'd like to know what others think. Yeah, that's just, yeah.
Okay.
So just to add to what Anantu said, so we belong to the same institution, except that he is a full-time PhD scholar and I am a part-time scholar. So I agree with him that two publications that needs to be ready before you submit your thesis. I think that's still okay because it's just going to add on, when you're applying for your postdoctoral, fellowships or whatever, you already have your publications ready. But the only challenge, as I said, is for me personally, and I'm sure Kriti would also second me in that it does take time, and especially mine, since it's also a qualitative only study and it's an ethnographic study. Perhaps the mere design of my study itself is one of the challenges here, where perhaps I went a little overboard and was a little ambitious in the beginning that I want to do this way. But I realized that publications do take time. They take time for you to write a draft well, for you to review the relevant literature as well. And so all of this does take a lot of your time. So finding that time, as I may come across as sounding really silly that I'm not able to find time being in academia, but it's just the reality of life. And I think this is a panel where we must address this thing that, what's your workload like? Can you really balance research with full-time teaching responsibilities, right? And you also have your family and kids to take care of. Many times we're told that, you have to earn the doctorate, that is to get those two initials before your name, you really have to put in that hard work. But I'd like to contest that and say that that should not be the way. Research and your doctoral journey should be something that's enriching, and it shouldn't be such that it takes away every iota of your energy, and it makes the whole balancing of work life and family difficult. That should not happen. So just to build on what the others said, yes, publications is challenging. It requires a little more time. And as I said earlier, because of the nature of my study itself, I am now confident that I can turn my data into, proper publications. Until a few months ago, I wasn't feeling that confident because I was not familiar with my data itself, right? And in terms of AI and tools, other kinds of AI tools in research, as of now, Mahe hasn't really introduced a line anywhere that says that don't use any of these tools yet. But personally, for me, I have used AI tools to make my life easier. As I said, particularly when it comes to literature review, if you are aware of it, there are two brilliant applications. One is called the Lit Maps, and the other one is called as Reading Rabbit. Okay, both Reading Rabbit and Lit Maps are brilliant for simplifying your literature review. It's not going to write the review for you. It's just going to help you find the relevant literature. So if you key in a particular, paper, it is just going to help you find similar papers instead of you going and doing the search manually. Lit Maps and Reading Rabbit can do that for you, so that at least you're able to synthesize and say, okay, these are the papers that are relevant, and then build on the other relevant literature. So yes, as of now, we do use, at least I use tools to make my research journey simpler. And as of now, the university hasn't said anything against it. But the other ethical clearance process itself, as we brought it up in the panel discussion, also that is a little tedious. But I was able to get through it. If you have the relevant, documents, it's fine. But as Ashwini rightly pointed out, it should be perhaps we need to have something different for the social sciences, and not just just go with the health sciences template and adapt it to the social sciences. That should stop, I guess. Yeah, I think those are the two things that I would want to talk about. Yeah.
Thanks, Dr. Banu, for
Thank you.
asking a question that triggered quite quite a lot of responses. Just to add on to Dr. Ashwini's and also the question you raised, at Mahe we have open science policy where on a 1,000 we can actually share data. This is like collected by, say, if we are working on computational communication, like we collect data and we can place it on F1000, where it can be vetted by peer reviewers whom you never know, you may not know. And it gets a digital object identifier, so on and so forth. So that sort of support for data collection, quantitative especially, is offered by our university. Just wanted to.
All right, there is no hard and fast yes and no type of answer. The way you try to explain this is really good, because I just want to focus the discussion towards the new challenges that we have been facing because of the technology, because of the other requirements. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.
Sanjay here. The yesterday in the ICA session, one of the observations made was that are we becoming quasi colonialized? Now, from the literature review experience, and I'm not saying that you alone, even our papers might have extremely colonized references. This is not to say that us and them or me and others. How many of you have actually experienced the dearth of relevant data-based analytical articles in the context in which you are working? It's all right. There is a Sonia there. There's a Sham here. There is a Marx there. Perfect. But is that a challenge for you to see how do I overcome this particular contextual factor? Is there any experiential reference you would like to? Thank you.
So this is something we've learned in your classes. I mean, I'm going to say it back to you, but for the benefit of the others. So naturally, when we are trying to construct our conceptual framework, it's very important for us to keep in mind that we are, working in South Asia, and therefore the theories, the constructs, the concepts have to be relevant to the community that we are working with. So I think one of the mistakes that I had initially made in during my literature review in the initial process before my registration was that I was mainly looking at theories which were well accepted, which were, which had credibility, which would add some weightage to my research, without realizing that it did not completely, it couldn't be completely identified with my kind of work. And I think as emerging scholars, we are also a little scared of grounded theory because we don't think we are, good enough to be creating a new theory all by ourselves and something like that. So I was initially quite hesitant, but eventually I went for the, so there's a theory of communicative ecology by Joe A. Taki. So I decided to go with that because that allows me to kind of change around some of the elements of the theory to fit it to my topic. So I think to answer your question, there is definitely a low presence of theories which are applicable to our kind of research that we know about and are taught about, except for certain classes, for example, yours. But yeah, I feel that right from the start, including our master's level, we don't really learn enough about Asian scholars. Like, for example, we have Dr. Adhikari here also, and his Sadharanikaran model, which we had learned about. So, there you would not usually hear of those kind of constructs or concepts until and unless you willingly go out of your way to try to find out what exists out there.
Adding on to what Samriddhi just mentioned, In my research too, I've experienced this lack of literature or even theories to sort of from the South Asian context, all the more from the Indian context. So as I said, while I'm trying to study how children use digital media, India turns out to be the second largest mobile market, right, in the world, right? And interestingly, there are no restrictions yet, or any kind of law, forget restrictions, anything that says that children's content has to be made in a specific way, or this is the way that children should be consuming. There is no support for parents, all the more. I think which it's the bigger problem that schools, governments, everybody says that parents should control children's use of digital media, but tell me how, right? So there is no real, support system per se. And the literature also tells me that research in this direction is very, very, very minimal. Another challenge that I also experienced, in terms of representation of children itself. So many a times it is just the parents who are answering the interviews, or even more difficult is that older children, adolescents are in your sample and not the younger kids. So just even the studies, that well-known studies that have happened in the West, the US and in the UK, have predominantly focused on the adolescents more. And that's also because they're readily accessible. You can still speak to them, right? And that's not the case with the younger children. And so one of the problems that I also faced is that when I'm trying to cite, relevant research, even in South Asia, contextually, we are yet to reach to the standards of what the West is talking about. West, in the UK, for example, they're talking about children's digital rights, right? We are yet to get there. It's very, very far away. And so I would not find research that talks about these topics from an Asian context, let alone Indian. So definitely, yes. So I have to constantly be relying only on, largely Western researchers and their citation.
What I have seen is in political communication, there is a lot of literature ever since 2014 Lok Sabha elections with the presence of Narendra Modi. A lot of literature in terms of analyzing right-wing politics and subsequently the left-wing. There is literature, in fact, on how the central government works and specifically state-specific research also. Comparing the Communist Party literature, and then again down south we have Janata Dal and other parties, DMK and all of that. So in terms of political communication, there is no lack of Indian literature. We have plenty of it. But when it, and also I would suggest that while theories, I had used framing theory, which was given by Erving Goffman, but then the two definitions given by Shanto Iyengar on how to divide framing into episodic and thematic frames. That is a very important definition given, and I saw a lot of literature on that also. And then again, Everett Rogers' disciple, we have Arvind Singhal, a lot of definitions given by him as well, and we have Sadhanikaran model here also. That way, I feel like, yes, a South Asian literature and research is coming up, though it is slow, but yes, it is growing in the academia. Yeah, that's what is my take.
Hello. Yeah. So definitely what Samriddhi mentioned about conceptual framework and scales for me. So it was a challenge to find something that was closer home. So I will not repeat that. I think one thing I would like to bring out here is when I was doing my literature review, because I was very clearly told that please look at mostly Scopus, please look at recent publications, Q1, Q2. Finding Indian papers over there was a big challenge, because of which I felt I was in like this, like a vicious circle where I wanted to know what my Indian scholars were saying. And I'm sure they have valid points, and I wanted didn't want to repeat myself or didn't want my research to be redundant, therefore. But for my literature review, when I was going for my proposal stage, I couldn't present a lot of Indian papers over there because they were, not in Scopus, not in the acclaimed, sort of journals. So I would say that, yes, somewhere that whole, the colonization part is something that came to my mind because I'm thinking that, okay, like, as Indians, a lot of scholars are still figuring out how to publish. And as a new scholar, I'm not able to present their work or represent or include that as a part of my study because, it's not in Scopus. So I think that would be one thing that I would want to point out.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly say that even within our peer groups, the barriers to, publishing in good journals is something that we often discuss, right? But I mean, I just wanted to go back to that Asian perspective or the absence of, Asian scholarship. In my area, which is digital intimacies and online dating and relationships, etc., there seems to be a very strong Chinese presence. So a lot of new studies, coming out of China. Some of these maybe, Chinese scholars doing research in Western universities, right? But yeah, there seems to be a growing presence of Chinese scholars in my area at least. Yeah.
When sir asked question, I thought it was a question for me. Sir, yes, indeed, I faced lots of trouble in finding literature when I started my journey here. See, I started my journey as journalist back then, and I was constantly seeing lots of horoscopic content or astrology content related to that, or many content related to that. Also, there is we are in a land where college gives you a degree, BA degree on astrology, all regarding these calculations, etc. But when I wanted to strengthen my research topic, I had to depend on works done in Britain, New Zealand, Australia, USA. There were like I can say that my complete work depended on the literatures, on the studies which are done in those countries. So it might be like quantitative, it might be qualitative, it might be about the books, many things. Yes, I felt there was a real problem for me to. I mean, when it comes to astrology and all, there are just mentioning of those words in Indian articles or like this South Asian article, just that. But in depth, when the connecting between this horoscopic content and media, it was not at all. I mean, I cannot say not at all, but it was seen in very, very, very less amount.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any more questions from Elite 6?
Bhargav, can you wrap
Yeah.
up the discussion, please? Thank you.
Okay. So before I wrap up, thank you all. Do you have any specific questions among yourself, like that you would like to ask your fellow panelists?
I have a question,
Quick.
but
Yeah.
just one point I remembered I wanted to tell you because you spoke about the borders and the language. So I had a problem with that. I mean, like there are many respondents and participants who I can approach for my study in Kasargod district. Kasargod district belongs to Kerala, but predominantly the language that used is Kannada. So I'm and they are like more towards like we belong to Dakshin Kannada district and we are Kannadigas. But unfortunately, I still have to find solution to how I can add them in my research so then they can add value to my study. So yeah, that was a point I wanted to share regarding this language and borders.
I thank each and every one of you for adhering to the guidelines and making this panel session nice and enriching experience. And I thank everyone in the audience and professors who attended this session. And, thank you all.
The recording has stopped.